So how long have you been back in LA? When did you move back post-pandemic?
So I moved back mid-June 2021.
Okay.
So I had kind of originally, like the first time I moved over here was January 2020. And it was kind of like I had been for years I was working on getting a visa and doing the whole commute over here and, saving money for all that sort of stuff. And then got over here January 2020, spent all of this money that I had saved up on apartment, furniture, the visa, the whole thing. And then I played 6 weeks worth of shows and then I went back to Oz for 2 weeks just for a holiday. And I went with an empty bag because I thought I was bringing more stuff over.
Right.
And about a couple of days before I was meant to come back, my team called me and they were like, do not leave Australia. Everything's shut down here. You're safer over there. And then, ended up getting stuck over in Oz, which was an absolute blessing. But,
Sure, but I'm sure it didn't necessarily feel like that at the time,
No, it was a tough one to swallow, especially you've been working towards something for so long and you finally get there and then it's kind of snatched away from you a little bit. But it's bizarre because I was on the one side, I was obviously I was devastated about my career and that sort of thing, obviously a lot of money gone, but that's, life is more than money. All my things were over in America, which was more of a funny anecdotal part of it. But, it was more I feel like I was more grateful during that period than I sometimes, was in other periods in my life because I was just surrounded by my friends and family. And it just made me very I don't know, it gave me it put me in a very good headspace in terms of it showed me what kind of really mattered. And it was very at the end of the day, no matter, what you choose to do throughout your life or, whether you're in this career or that career or whatever your path is, these people are going to be there for you and love you and support you no matter what. So I was definitely very grateful during that period. But yeah, it was definitely a difficult one to swallow for sure.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like, now that you're back in LA and you're sort of back in the rat race, back in what you had been planning on doing years ago, are you approaching it any differently than you would have, say if you had just kept going in 2020 and there was no pandemic?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think it was more disruptive for me and I struggled in the first probably year of being over here, especially because then once I came over here, I kind of came June 2021. So COVID was still a thing. Probably not, things were starting to open up. So it wasn't as much of a thing, but I came over then, and when I came over, Australia had strict quarantine still. So I had to sign a declaration saying that I wouldn't go back to Australia for a certain period of time. And because of visa things, I kind of was in a period where I then came into America and couldn't leave America. So then it was this whole, I had been stuck in Australia. Now I'm stuck in America. And that was probably 10 months that I wasn't able to leave. And I think that 10 months was very difficult on me. It was great in terms of, I was playing shows and the career side was happening, but it was almost polar opposite where when I was in Australia, it was all my career's fallen to shit. Money's gone, belongings are gone, whatever, but I have my family and all that sort of stuff. And then it kind of became the opposite where it's okay, here I am, career's flourishing, we're doing all this, but I don't have, the family and friends. I mean, FaceTime is great and all that sort of stuff. But when you're used to day in, day out, seeing each other and having those daily interactions. It was, I don't know, pretty tough.
Well, yeah, it's almost like an interesting science experiment where to learn about what you actually want out of your life, right? Because
Yeah.
I think anyone who does something like this career, of course, you can relate to like it's so hard to get where you want to go. And if you feel like you've got some momentum and you got this shot, it's like, of course, that becomes like the most important. It's like all you can see. But then if you do this science experiment where you literally, it's like an A/B test where you're like, how do you feel when this is the only thing? And it's like, how do you feel when you have 0% of one thing and 100% of the other, or 100% of the one thing and 0% of the other, and which feels better, and how do you act, and what thoughts come to you in those moments? I mean, it's super interesting, and I can see what you're saying of how valuable an experience like that would be, where of course the ideal is to have both, but like
balance, like
of course,
but
of course.
Honestly, I learn a lot, and I learn a lot about myself. I definitely am a big worker. I always am very focused. I love what I do and I love working hard. But it was interesting to see, because I noticed, like, I'm also very into like getting the most out of yourself, like having yourself running as efficiently as possible. And I don't mean that in a way where it's like, I'm just going to work 24/7 and blah, blah. I'm obviously finding techniques that show me that I can actually get more work done in shorter amount of times if I do ABC. But one of the things that I really discovered is that my inspiration when it comes to like inspiration and motivation when it comes to music and work doesn't at all come from like, I'm a motivated person, so it comes from within a little bit, but I noticed that a lot of that inspiration and motivation came from a lot of those like social interactions with my friends and family, completely unrelated to music. So it was very interesting to kind of see the impact of that.
It's important. I mean, there's like, because I really hate, and I think a lot of people are sort of coming around to this idea that like, for a while, the sort of grindset mentality was really sexy, and it seemed to be a thing that like everyone thought was a really positive way to be. And I think we're sort of coming around to the idea that it's actually sort of insane and harmful. And like you said, that we need balance, but it's a thing I preach. The only reason I'm like ranting about it is because of what you said of sort of, you got more inspired when you were actually spending time away from music for a while, coming back to it, being with people you liked, having something else to distract your mind, all of that kind of stuff, man. I think it's a trap people can fall into, especially early on, of being like, well, I just have to eat, sleep, and breathe this. And if I do anything else, I'm sort of failing, or I got to feel guilty. When the reality is, the earlier you can balance your life, I think the better it's going to be for you creatively.
Yeah, big time. And like, I've gone through periods of serious, that serious grind mentality. And, eventually at the end of the day, and as cliche and obvious as it sounds, like you're going to burn out. And whether that burnout happens in 2 months, 2 years, like it can take a long time to happen. But once you get there, like it can be at a point where you've burnt yourself so much that you're like, you can't get going again. You almost can't recover. And you do see it happen to some artists. And I hate seeing it, but and it's interesting because I think I am still like I'm still a big believer of like the grind. I guess it's more like putting in the time and putting in the work, but that doesn't mean, 8 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. at night, not doing anything else, like it's more like I'm going to put in my hours. And say, for example, if it works for you where you can set up, okay, every day from 9 till 5, I'm going to work on music or work on whatever you need to work on. Sure. I'm a big believer in like sitting down, be patient. It's going to take time, but put in the time, put in the work, and, you will get there. But in saying that, it's not that doesn't mean, yeah, like I said, waking up first thing in the morning, sitting at the computer, not talking to anyone else, not looking after yourself, not looking after your body, not looking after your mind. That's not actually going to get you there in the end.
Yeah, 100%. I'm right there with you. And yeah, I certainly agree that yes, you have to put in tons of time. You have to do the 10,000 hours, all of that. Like that, it's the unsexy truth of success. I think it not only in art, but kind of in anything is like, there's really, everyone wants the shortcut, and there is no shortcut other than just like work harder at it, not even work harder at it, but just allow yourself the time to get better at it. Like,
yes,
the only way you're going to get better is, yeah, exactly. Be patient, be persistent, all of that. I mean, where does that mindset come from? Because it sounds like you have maybe always been that way. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's interesting hearing you say that, because I'm like, oh, I'm kind of lucky because I love that. Like, I enjoy being like that, and that's kind of like who I am. Like, I love slowly chipping away at a goal where it's like every day I put the work in, and I don't know, I find, say, for example, in my career, like I remember early on making decisions about, studying or taking private lessons or having mentors or doing all this stuff when it comes to my skill acquisition, so that because I knew in the future it would make my life a lot easier. And there are moments now where something will happen. Either I get a very short deadline for a remix, or I'm up DJing and the decks are all out of whack, or something's broken, or something's not working, all this sort of stuff. And now in those situations, I feel very comfortable in, resolving them, because I put in a lot of time and a lot of work, consistently for many years. So now I like almost feel relaxed through those situations. Whereas, if you kind of skip those steps, those things that come up could end up being sort of career ending if you're getting these opportunities but you're not being able to convert them, or anything like that. But I think it comes from, like, it's definitely been a part of my mentality from as early as I can remember. But as a kid, I played a lot of sports. I was very committed to anything that I took on. So whether it was, a sport or an instrument or anything like that, I actually, super random, but I started at 3 years old as a ballerina.
Okay.
And I did that from 3 until I was about 18. And that was something that was consistently there throughout my whole, upbringing.
And you achieved a fair amount of success in the ballet world, right?
Yeah, randomly. Yeah, I say randomly now because it's like I'm like a bass dubstep DJ producer, which is like the most gremlin thing ever.
Yeah. Although I will say, there's absolute. I mean, dance music is body music, right? Like it's part of what makes dance music different from other genres is that when you're making it, you're thinking about how it's going to affect people's bodies, right? Not just their emotions, but like the way people actually dance and move and experience it. Even if it's just like heavy bass rattling somebody's brain around, So I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's a reach, but I feel like a dance background. I was talking to Lunis about this, actually. I think a dance background can absolutely help you as a music maker. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Like there are so many crossovers. Some are more obvious than others. But mentality wise, it was a big one because it was very much about discipline. It's very much about look at yourself and don't compare to others. Are you better than you were yesterday? And, work on becoming better than you were yesterday. And also, you're trying to get to a certain point, but that takes working, a little bit each day to get there. And also there's a lot of other things that we had where it was like, we had to learn routines really quickly. There was a lot of like that kind of skill acquisition, which kind of gets your brain going, which actually makes you better at learning in general, which is super helpful as well. So and I also had a lot of other sports that I was doing at the same time for many years, but that's definitely one I think that helped teach me that kind of mentality from a very young age.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure it helped that you probably enjoyed the activity as well, right? Like, because
Yeah,
I think for young kids, it's not that all young kids reject structure, but I think young kids can get bored easily. And if it's an
definitely.
activity they're not into, then it's sort of hard to keep them focused. How much of this was coming from your parents as far as like, whatever you do, take it seriously, or like the
Yeah,
importance of
I
hard work,
honestly,
all of that?
yeah, it's just funny because like my parents probably wish I didn't do it half the time. I think they got over like, sometimes it's like I was so committed and they were like, I don't want to have to drive you to another practice on another day. As soon as I got my driver's license, my mum was like, oh, thank God, like she could take
They kind
herself.
of created a monster with that.
Yeah. But honestly, like, I think like my parents, if anything, because my mentality was so, like, I was so motivated and focused on it. If anything, they helped me sort of see the world view in terms of, okay, like this is a really big thing for you and you're doing really well. Don't forget, there's a lot of aspects to life. I had an opportunity when I was about 15 where I went to Melbourne and it was kind of the crunch point of, do you want to come to this school and, you know, give a shot at giving this being your profession? You would come to school, you would have dance classes as part of school every day and this whole thing. And I went with my mom and I remember her saying, she's always so supportive. My parents are supportive in no matter what I do. But she said to me, just remember, if you do choose to do this, that's all you can do. There's no going to Sunday soccer. There's no touch football. There's no running. There's no boys or girls or friends or, like not just in that sort of like, this will be your life.
Yeah.
And that was a very big decider for me because I was so passionate about a lot of different things. But also, too, the reason I got into it is because I have an older sister. She's 2 years older. It's just us two. I absolutely love her to death. But when we were kids, I just wanted to do as she did. I wanted to be like her. And so she started ballet when she was 3 years old. So then when I was
Okay.
3, I was like, I want to do exactly as you did. The only difference is she didn't exactly stick with anything that she picked up. So
Right.
here she was dropping everything a couple of years later, and I was committed to it until the very end. So,
That's
but yeah,
funny.
they were definitely supportive, but I think they did have some part in helping me with that mindset, but not. I don't remember them. They sometimes told me like a few things. They are quiet workers. They're very modest. They'll do the work and they won't necessarily say anything about it, which kind of helps, add to that. But in their lives, they were working towards a goal they started a business and it was a long, slow grind. So I think maybe subconsciously some of that did, kind of rub off on me, not realizing, when I was younger, but seeing it slowly, seeing them at the start and they were really working hard and they were struggling with some things financially. It was really tough. And then seeing that growth over the period of 10, 20 years, it's, even though they're not necessarily like telling me details about it, you can, as you grow older, you kind of see it
Yeah.
happening in
Well,
front
and
of you.
kids learn by example, I think, more than by
Mm-hmm.
what their parents say anyway. So, I mean, that
Exactly.
totally makes sense. Just a second ago, you were saying how you love sort of the idea of chipping away at a career or a skill or any of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I mean, that sounds like very similar to what they were doing with building that company. Not to mention, I'm sure
Definitely.
another example they set is that, you can do it on your own if you have an interest
Yeah.
and, as opposed to sort of getting into the workforce, that sort of thing. not that there's anything wrong with it, but that this is a path
Yeah.
that you can do.
That you can do. Yeah, they were definitely a good example of that. And not only that, but they also were, neither of them went to university. And they have now ended up with a company that's very successful that works, most of the people they would hire now, it's a prerequisite. But
Right.
theirs was, they put in the time, they learnt the skills and all those things. Okay, maybe it wasn't at university, but they still put in the hours in a different way and learn all those skills. So it's interesting to see it work in a bit of a different way than the conventional, like you go to university and do this. I mean, I actually did study at university, but I never had a pressure to do that, which was also a really cool way to grow up. It was a cool example to see.
Yeah. Oh, no, of course. And yeah, I think not having the weight of expectations on you a little bit. I mean, if anything, it sounded like it was your own expectations that were driving some of this.
Definitely my own expectations, probably more than them. I think that can be worse sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially in this kind of business where I think it's pretty easy to judge yourself, kind of the opposite of what you were saying about ballet. Like in this kind of thing, I think it's very easy to judge yourself based on where you're ranking against everybody else.
Yeah.
And have you figured out anything about that as far as like holding yourself to a high standard, but also making sure it's your standard and not anyone else's?
Yeah, it's honestly a big battle that kind of comes and goes. I think quite early on, I got very good at it in terms of like not comparing to others, not letting things bother me too much. I was looking at the bigger picture. I was like, let's look at down the road and this might happen now, but this is the end goal kind of thing. I think when I moved to the States, it was a big shock to my system again, because it's like you've gone from big fish, small pond, to being a tiny little fish over here. And also understanding and knowing your skills and your ability, but you're coming into a new place where you have to kind of prove yourself again. And in this industry, like you are constantly told, whether it's, directly or, by other means, but you're constantly told your worth and who you're worth more than and who you're worth less than. And that's a hard thing to sit with, especially when you have a lot of alone time. Because you've got a lot of time to sit and dwell and stew and listen to opinions of people who half the time it's like, who gives a fuck what they think? Oh, I don't know. Am I allowed to swear? I don't know. Is that okay?
Of course.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been trying really hard not to. And that's not where you go.
Well, hey.
But yeah, it can be really tough. And I think also when I came to the States, I'm trying to work out like, what my strategy is over here. And so you're looking and what's going on here and what should I be doing and how do they do things here? But it's not as soon as I realized that was happening, because you can realize things and not get out of it. But as soon as I managed to get myself out of that headspace is when I felt that everything was just flowing a lot easier. Sure, sometimes there are moments where you have to be a bit like, oh, okay, like we do have to think about this and this is where you stand, and you get disappointed and upset, but you can't dwell on it. You got to move on and focus your headspace into somewhere that is going to help you like grow something that's, kind of pushes past all of that.
That moment of sort of moving here from Australia is really interesting. And I want to frame that moment a little bit. So before we even start talking about that, let's talk about how you started building your career in Australia, or even before the word career comes into it. I mean, you're on the, you're a ballet dancer, you're playing a lot of sports, you go to university also for like more or less sports medicine. Is that right?
Yeah. Exercise sports science.
Which is all of the, I mean, it's super interesting. It's super cool. There's probably an alternate parallel reality where that's your whole life. How did dance music come in? Like, how did the course get altered?
Yeah, well, I think Look, I played instruments from a very young age. I probably started piano at about 7 years old, and stuck with it until I was 18. Always, I picked up the guitar around 13, taught myself that. Was a drummer from 13. So like music was always a big part of my life. I loved like writing songs. But I was never the best in my class or my cohort or whatever, playing any particular instrument. I was never the best at writing music, but I just loved it. I just loved doing it. Like even when I was
what kind of
a young
songs,
kid.
not to cut you off, but like what kind of
No, go for
songs
it.
are we talking about early on? You said you loved writing songs. Was this something you would just do for yourself? Was anyone hearing these
Yes.
songs?
Some of it. So as I got into high school, I was like a part of a band and like wrote some of our songs. So it would be like, guitars, drums, singers, maybe a piano in there or something. Or so it would usually be, or it would be like guitar and singing, piano singing, like that kind of style. As I got into the end of high school, I was also doing like orchestra, like writing for orchestras and stuff as well.
Oh, wow.
Which was awesome. Absolute nightmare because you can't just do that on your own. You need an orchestra
Scoring
to come
is
and
hard, man. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I played trumpet all throughout high school, and so I have a degree in music, and part of that was sort of learning about the orchestral scoring, and I've had to do a very small amount of it, is the point, and damn, that it's very hard to do.
Yeah, it's not fun at all. And like now I know the technology has advanced a fair bit, but I remember like when I was doing it at school, it was just some of the programs were just not quite there, and I ended up doing a lot of it by hand. And but yeah, I kind of was doing a lot of that sort of stuff, and then I just thought if I wasn't the best at anything, like how could I make a career in music? I had a friend who was a DJ, but I didn't really know much about it. So I just thought that's going to be my passion and I'm going to love it. But realistically, I was very analytical and I was like, how are you going to make a career in music? So if you're not going to, don't go to uni and do that, just play it on the side, have fun with it, enjoy it. And so then I went to uni and I missed music so much. So and also like I heard, like I remember the moment distinctly, but I heard I heard Flume's remix of Hyper Paradise, which is by Hermitage Dude. And I remember hearing that song and being like, holy shit, like, what is this? Like, and someone's like, it's Flume. And I was like, that was the first, it's not that I hadn't heard electronic music before, but that's the first time that I really was like, holy shit, he made this song completely on his computer. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I can keep doing the thing that I love doing just for fun, without needing to like get a band together. I can do it on my own time, like whenever. So I started trying to learn to produce just again for fun. And the friend who was trying to teach me was like, you have no idea what the fuck is going on. So why don't you start by learning to DJ, get comfortable with the music, get comfortable with like some of the equipment, and then we can build from there. So I entered this DJ competition called Your Shot, which is essentially like you don't need any experience and they teach you how to DJ and then you perform. And I performed.
Is this like a televised competition?
No,
or?
I think they might have done a series over here, but it was in Australia. It's not televised. It's just like they're huge events. Yeah, so I learned from that. Got poached on the day I got a residency at Chinese Laundry. And
amazing.
which was great. It just kind of picked up momentum. Like I was just enjoying it. I was DJing all the time. Again, just for fun on the side. I would stand in like the corner of a bar and play for 5 hours for some cash while I was at uni. Like I wasn't really like, I just loved it.
Well, can we just dig into that? Because I love those early gig memories so much,
yeah.
and especially the competition part. Like, walk me through what you actually did in your performance. Like, is this like a full hour-long set? What kind of music are you playing? What's the crowd like? All of that.
So it's really cool. It's kind of run like a festival. So it's like there's multiple stages. I think there were 5 stages, all in like different rooms or outside or whatever. And you essentially, like, everyone who was playing would sell tickets, to your friends, family, to come watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you sold more, like a lot of tickets, your room would be more full. But in saying that, like, everyone's selling tickets. So the event days are so busy that it like doesn't make a difference. Every room's full pretty much the whole weekend. But yeah, most of the time it's like the first time you're DJing, so everyone's like just there to support you and whatever.
Yeah.
I think you had 25 minutes. And I was not a good DJ. I was like, I didn't understand. I didn't have this, like, obviously the experience and the skills, but like, I wouldn't play a whole track out or anything, but, I wasn't used to like quick transitions. I think I always kind of had my own unique taste, and I also understood, like, kind of how to make it into a journey.
Yeah.
And it was really at this competition that I honed in on like loving bass music. Before all this, I just did a huge deep dive into every subgenre of electronic music you could imagine, and I just kind of fell in love with dubstep and bass music. I just was like, it's so different. Like, it kind of has that shock value in it. I was so I don't know, interested in the sound design and how they were creating these noises. It seemed like something that was like really difficult to produce. And for me, I was like, I really want to challenge myself. The guy who was the MC of the event, Dr. Werewolf, who's now one of my best friends and was like a big mentor for me, but he was the one who was scouting for Chinese Laundry. And I could mix, like, I had the technical side down. The CDJs we were working with was 800, so still fairly new enough, but we didn't have the BPM to the decimal place. You couldn't see the whole waveforms. It was definitely a little bit more using your ear and your touch. But yeah, it was mostly like two breakdowns mixed together, or like, kind of slot everything in. I definitely improved a lot.
Sure. But he must have seen something that stood out to him in your performance. Because I mean, like, China, I assume a lot of people listening know what Chinese Laundry is, but I mean, that's a very significant club in Sydney. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think he saw that I had quite a unique taste. I was playing a lot of different music to a lot of the other people that were playing. And I wasn't thinking, and it's so like funny to think about now, because a DJ, you think about like pleasing the crowd. But I was thinking, like, what music do I like, and what order and which way am I presenting this that's like kind of enjoyable for them, that they can kind of come on this journey with me. So I think he really saw that and was like, this chick's like, she's got something that's a bit deeper than just like, oh, like everyone will jump when I play this song because they know it. You know what I mean? And I definitely had the performance. I had passion. I was loving it. And, he knew it was my first ever set. So he was like, she's going to, get better and better with time. So,
yeah, well, I think there's something to that. I was listening to a bunch of your discography earlier today too, and it's hard to put my finger on exactly what this is. So this might come out a little awkwardly, but I think there's something about your production that I like, because it's basically, I can tell that you love, what you've already said, that you love dubstep, you love bass music. I can tell that you've been inspired by certain eras or sounds or maybe even artists, but in all of that, it never sounds like you're trying to copy any of it, or it never sounds like you're sort of following the hot trend of it. Like all your stuff, regardless of whether it's, super heavy or super chilled out, there's a unique quality to it. Like it sounds like a person, like it sounds like a specific perspective. And I don't know if you'd agree with that or if that's intentional, but that's kind of, for me, I was like, that was what pulled me into what you do the most, I think.
It is interesting because, there was a big part of me that was like, well, I don't recreate what other people do because I can't, I don't have the skills, but now as time has gone on, I do produce for other people. And it sounds very much like whatever the reference is or whatever the sound is, like I can do it in those scenarios. But when it comes to my music, I think, I also, like, as I got older, I realized this too. Like, I kind of thought everyone's brain worked like mine did. I was just like, this is how everyone thinks, like, obviously.
That would be nice, right? Yeah.
You get a bit older and you're like, oh, like, that's not like a normal way to think. And there's sometimes like people bring things up and they're like, oh, you have this mentality. I'm like, oh, yeah, like, that's something that I don't realize that not everyone has. But yeah, when I write music, a lot of the time, I pull inspiration from places that aren't always electronic music, but even if they are, it's so weird because the inspiration like sticks out at me like a sore thumb. Like, it's like, that's the inspiration, but I want to use that in a different context or in my context or whatever. Sometimes it could just be a rhythm. Sometimes it's a kind of tone. Sometimes it's like a vocal effect, or like it could be the words, or it could be the feeling, like whatever it is. And so that's why when I kind of start playing with that, it really, like, that's why it always ends up sounding like something completely unique, because it's not like with that intent. I don't know like how or why inspiration, like I kind of can harness inspiration like that. And the other thing that's like strange too is like I have such, like, I do have a diverse catalog that's quite, some of it's heavy, some of it's light, some of it's moody, like, it's kind of all over the place a little bit. But I think it all very much sounds like me. But even myself, like, I can't quite work out what it is that makes it sound like me. It just, which, I mean, I love it. I don't think about it, I don't like, which is good. But it's got this sort of uniqueness. And I think, like, also when I go to write music, even if I start with an inspiration, like a lot of the times I will start a track being like, if I'm stuck and I'm not feeling inspired, I will pull a track that I love and be like, I want to make this, like my version of this. And I'll start there and it ends up being completely different, nothing to do with that, because you kind of start with it and then it sends you off on a tangent, and then I just kind of follow that flow until I'm, all the way down the line and realize that I'm sitting with something like completely different.
I think it's kind of about leaning in. I was thinking while you were talking, because, you started off saying that, well, at the start, I wasn't able to make the exact song that somebody else made. And even if you are now, I feel like, it's a good piece of advice to kind of lean into, instead of getting frustrated at things you're not able to do. It's more about like flipping that around and being like, well, okay, so what is weird about the way I'm doing it? Is there anything cool about that I could actually focus on? And
it's interesting too, because when I first, started speaking to my manager and we were, talking about working together, he listened to my music that I sent him and I didn't release any of it. And I was thinking back to that and I was like, God, that music was bad, like it wasn't good music. And I was like, what made you want to work with me when you had heard that music? And he's like, look, I knew you were going to develop. I knew you were going to get better and blah, blah. And he was like, the thing that stood out to me was you were unique. You weren't doing, none of it sounded generic. None of it sounded like things I'd heard before. None of it sounded like you were copying something else. Like it just genuinely sounded like you doing you. And obviously, you're signing an artist and you can see that they're kind of on their own path. And it is really nice now as I, kind of get deeper and deeper into this career, because it's hard when you do look out and I start going, oh, should I be doing this? And is this going to blah, blah. But the second I go no and just sit back in my intuition, and I know some people don't have this, but when I sit back into my intuition, whatever it is, it just like, I know what to do. Like straight away, my head is like, this is cool. This is what inspires me. Like, I don't give a fuck what other people are doing. I don't care what the trend is. The trend, if there's a trend that's come, you've already missed it. You weren't
right.
the one to like really initiate that. And I'm not like someone to chase trends. I'm someone to like, who wants to create something like different and meaningful for people years down the track. And look, if bass music isn't popular for a 3-year period, that's okay, because 3 years later it's going to come back, or however the cycle kind of continues. And I know through that, like there's still a whole heap of us that love it and are still passionate about it and are going to, explore that and share that passion together.
Yeah, absolutely. Big or small, it's, I think, about that community aspect of it and about following your own heart with it. I mean, do you feel like you as a producer, we're talking about how you have a pretty broad range of sounds that you've made and put out. Is it heading somewhere? Like, do you feel like you're sort of on your way to a specific thing? Or is it more about kind of that constant evolution and not getting too married to one or another, concrete sound?
I don't know. I'm very excited for when I feel I'm at the point of writing an album. I'm excited about that process. I'm excited about creating a project like that, because I am quite diverse, and I'm really enjoying the thought of like creating a whole journey through an album. I don't feel I'm at the point where I'm ready for that, both career-wise and just as an artist. I want to kind of pump out a little bit more to kind of, I don't know, I feel with every track I write, the better I get. So I know at the time, when the time is right, like I'll kind of know. I've also noticed how much my production has improved since I've been in the States. I've seen I put in effort. I took, sometimes I have periods where I feel like I plateau. And so I go back to, watching Twitch streams or paying for private lessons or doing sessions with other people and, going to Patreons and learning what I can. And I did like a big bout of that, like probably 8 months after I moved here. And I saw how much my production improved. So on that sense, like I feel like we're always improving, but I still feel like I'm riding that kind of wave up at the moment. But in terms of where I'm going, like I'm very much focusing, my natural instinct is taking me more to songwriting. There's definitely like a lot more of a songwriting element in there rather than, kind of going heavy party sound design kind of thing. I definitely slot them in there for both like my own sanity, but also, like I know that my fans also enjoy that as well.
Yeah, well, and it's fun. To me, there's never a problem. I think you can be so serious and still drop a fun banger. Like to me, there's no dissonance between those two ideas,
Yeah.
And another thing I'm hearing from you as we keep talking too, that I think is worth highlighting is it seems like you have a willingness to sort of not start over, but kind of like go back to school or go back to square one at a certain point, like philosophically, I guess is what I mean. Like it makes me think about that moment we were talking about earlier when you moved to the States from Australia. Like you already had somewhat of a career going in Australia, right? You were an established artist, a known quantity. I'd imagine doing plenty of shows and there's like some future there. You come to America, less of a known quantity. There's like a starting over period. And one part I wanted to talk about too, which just because it's an interesting story, when you made that move, you were operating music production schools in Australia. you moved to
Yeah.
the States and then attended Icon, like a different music production school yourself. Like it's an
Yeah.
interesting, like sort of starting over in so many ways. It's just a fascinating moment.
Yeah, I started studying an icon. I actually was studying icon online from
Okay.
Sydney when I was running the school. So it was kind of happening at the same time, which was a logistical nightmare. But
Well, I mean,
like
how
it
did you,
was.
why were you running schools at the time? How did that happen?
Well, yeah. So that was like, so when I was at uni, I started DJing and doing all this sort of stuff. And then about 6 months before my degree finished, I was working at a bar and it was closing down. So I was like, okay, I've got 6 months to either get another bar job, to tie me over until I, start my career in exercise and sports science, or or and this is what I ended up doing. I went, why don't I was living at home, I had money saved up, and I was like, why don't I go and get some experience in the back end of the music world, because I love music, I'm enjoying it. Maybe this is a way that I can keep sort of DJing but have like a day job in music. So I approached this guy, Sam Korotkov, and I said, look, can I just work for you for free? Like, I'm just interested to see what it's all about. I'm interested to learn. So I started as like an intern for him, worked for him for a few months. I was still at university, so it was, one day a week or something. And after a little while, him and his business partner, Steve, they came to me and said, look, we want to open these DJ schools. We're here to fund it, but we need someone to actually create them and do it. So that's what became my full-time job as soon as I finished uni. So it was it was an amazing experience. It taught me so much from, like, it was essentially starting a whole business from scratch. I was doing everything from, like having the website built to building physical locations, how I had to work out how you're going to teach DJs, without the sound bleeding too much. And, I was writing the syllabus, I was training teachers, I was doing all the scheduling. So it was pretty wild, and I definitely like learned a lot. And then, with time, I started opening the music production side of things. I had a teacher who was teaching it early on. By the end, I was definitely more there for questions because I'd done Icon at that point. And we were doing, shorter courses that were more specific. So, I was quite comfortable with what we were teaching, but I usually had like a teacher with years of experience, teaching those classes. So yeah, it was an interesting kind of parallel with everything happening. That also made me a better DJ because I was also teaching DJing. So every day I would have 2 or 3 classes that went for 3 hours, and I'm teaching people who don't know how to DJ. So, you've got all those hours that you're putting in. So
No, it's just fascinating to do something like that so early on in your career. Like, it's
yeah,
amazing. Again, they must have seen something in you to even think
yeah,
that this is something you could do, right? Because that's like
yeah.
on the face of
Honestly,
it.
it's scary. I could never think.
I mean, if you were just an
Yeah,
anonymous person, just
yeah.
asking someone to do that seems crazy when they
It
don't
does
have
seem
experience,
crazy.
right?
Yeah, like even now I think back, I think I was only like 21, 22, something like that. And I'm like, holy shit, these guys, like that could have ended horrendously. But, I was driven. I am very much a problem solver. So, a lot of it was I didn't know anything going in there. I'd never signed a commercial lease agreement. And here I was at 21, 22, sitting down with commercial real estate agents and my builder, like trying to start plans, like it was pretty wild. But yeah, I'm always someone who is happy to go back to learning or to learn at any point, like I think the people that become the best at what they do are ones who are so open-minded to learning more, and from anyone, it doesn't have to be the biggest and best producer. It could be absolutely anyone. I still have this moment embedded in my brain from, so after I finished at these schools, I then went again, this whole learning and doing and learning and doing. After I was running these DJ schools, I actually went back to intern again as a engineer. And it was in Flume's studio. He wasn't in there anymore, but every now and then he would come back. But I was interning again. I wanted to become a better engineer, wanted to learn and all that sort of stuff. And Flume was back in Oz for a little period, and he came into the studio, and I met him. He was kind of talking to me a little bit, and I was telling one of the other guys in the studio was saying that I had done Icon, and he was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "It's a school." And he's like, "What does that look like? What did you learn?" Blah blah blah. So I told him what the course looked like, the sort of things I learned. I still remember he was like, "Oh," and he's like, "That sounds amazing! Like amazing. Maybe I should do that." And I just looked at him like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, you don't need to like go back and do that." But that's kind of how my mentality is sometimes. Like I am keen and eager to learn because it's only going to make what I do even better, and that's in all spaces in life. But obviously, like music production is one that I definitely go back to and try and learn things. I even was teaching a production workshop a little while ago, and sometimes when you learn things so early, you don't realize as the technology like advances, you're just so used to your routine that you kind of forget about it. And even while I was teaching the class, I was like, "Oh, and this is how you can get around this system, if you do this." And then someone like put their hand up and they're like, "Oh, they have a feature for that now where you just press that button and it does it for you." And I was like, "Well, there you go." I didn't need to like teach you these like tricks that are kind of useless now, So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very productive way of thinking of if you feel like you've run out of some inspiration and you're not sure where to go, turning to learning and just being like, well, let me learn something. Let me just see, it doesn't have to be to specifically fix any kind of problem or anything. But yeah, I like that idea. I was talking to Dylan Francis on here a couple months ago, and he was saying that he has recently, like within the last year, gone back to school for production stuff too.
Yeah.
Just, for fun to kind of get re-inspired. And you can do it at any level, I guess is the point.
Yeah. I think also sometimes like for me too, it's like a passive way for me to put in my hours, like sometimes you're feeling low on the motivation and you're not feeling inspired, but you want to put in the time and effort. So sometimes learning is a way for me to like put that time in a way that's a bit more passive. Like, okay, I'm going to, whether it's a one-on-one private lesson, whether it's a Patreon video series, whether it's like a short course on something, it's a way to be like, okay, I'm still putting that time into my craft. It's just a little bit more passive. I don't need as much internal motivation. Someone's telling me these are the steps and get through it. So that helps when I'm not as motivated or I feel like I'm trying to improve a certain part of my production that's kind of slowing me down.
I mean, throughout this whole journey, you get to the States and you build the career up again, and you've had these interesting intersections with, different labels, different artists. Were there any moments like, obviously I know, you worked with Marshmello on his album that ended up getting nominated for a Grammy. You played Red Rocks, all these different big things that sound like big accomplishments. But I guess my question is for you, when you look back, what do you look at as like important points or inflection points or turning points? How do you look back at your journey thus far, I guess is the question.
Yeah, some of it is definitely slow build, but even when it's slow build, it does hit you at, sometimes I find it hits me at a certain moment. The first time I played Red Rocks, it was actually my first show over here after COVID.
Oh, that must have felt crazy.
that was insane. Like and like, well, you can still see it, but to this day it's up on YouTube. It was all video recorded and you can see the moment where it hits me. But I had a moment probably 3/4 of the way through the set. And I was singing Mr. Brightside. I made a Mr. Brightside edit, and which is a song from my teenage years that I absolutely loved. And it's just, I don't know.
It's an anthem. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I was up there, I was on stage, I was singing it, and I looked up at the rocks, I looked up at the crowd, and I just had this moment of like, like I've been working to get here for so long, and, so much has come back and forth. And I almost had like this kind of flashback of like all this shit that I had dealt with, over a period of years, and was like, look at you doing it, and you put in the time, and now you're here. I burst into tears. Like you can, it's not a close up, so you can't necessarily tell that I'm sobbing. You can actually hear me in the audio because I didn't realize I had the mic really close to my mouth when I was, crying. But, that was like a big moment for me, obviously very early on. But it's funny because then there were times after that I had some big moments and I wasn't feeling like I didn't feel as present, or I didn't feel like it was hitting me as much. I wasn't as like elated in that moment, which was a whole big part of discovery for me. There was definitely a lot of things going on, mentally for me in the background, things that at the start I was like, oh, that's a bit weird and I'm not as present and I don't feel elated. And slowly, months down the track, I worked out that I was actually sitting in, I was sitting in depression and not realizing what that looked like or the early signs of it until, I kind of got really deep in it and was like, here are the alarm bells ringing. But there have been moments that I think some of the biggest moments where I'm like really proud, some of it is either around like finishing a track, not even necessarily releasing it, but finishing a track. Or sometimes releasing, like I remember releasing an EP and, kind of I got put on the cover of Dubstep Don and, it was playlisted and doing really well. That moment for me was very like, I remember back when I couldn't believe that my, name was on Spotify, let alone, that kind of recognition. I actually recently, just this week, was given a remix opportunity that had a super short turnaround, which was even shorter because I got my wisdom teeth out last week, which meant I was,
nice.
out of it for half the days. But, it was a very quick turnaround. It was a really tough track to remix. And, I turned it around and really loved what I came up with. The band that I remixed, they loved it. It got approved straight away. A moment like that for me, especially right now, is kind of a big, like, look at you go. You're just doing your job, but like, how enjoyable it was, how fun it was, how my skills have developed to the point where that's, not anything too crazy for me. So that was a big moment. But some of the big moments have been more the in-between. So sometimes I'll be at dinner in a random city, sitting by myself having dinner. And those are sometimes the moments where I'm like, like, look at you on the other side of the world. Yeah, it's very like kind of serendipitous, or it's either those ones or it's the small shows that are my own headline shows somewhere that I've never been. Like I remember playing, and I know I bring it up plenty, but I remember playing in Bozeman, Montana. I didn't know about Bozeman, Montana. It's so far away from Sydney, Australia. And I remember going there and thinking, no one's going to come. I don't know anyone there. Like, what's going on here? And showing up and it being at capacity, and not capacity by chance, capacity by people actually knowing my music and singing along to my music. And, it wasn't a 5,000 person show. It's a 350 person show, but that is like, hey, what you're doing is resonating with people, and people want to come see it. They want to be a part of it. They're passionate about it. Those are probably the bigger moments, like for me, that really are like, you're out here like doing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is those smaller moments, those more private or personal moments. Not that playing a show is a private moment, but I know what you mean, where it's on paper, the sort of flashy accomplishments look like the biggest deals, but they're not always the ones that feel that way. And they're not always the ones that kind of, sometimes I think the bigger things, it can feel like you're sort of, it's like surfing and you caught a wave, Whereas the smaller ones, I guess that's more like what we're talking about. That's training in the gym for a year and then realizing that you can, bench press a little more, something like that, where it's like, wow, I've actually transformed myself,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, those smaller moments are definitely that. Or the ones where you think that, it's not going to amount to anything, or it's, I always try and have my expectations kind of lower, or like, I don't want to get disappointed when I get into these moments. And then there's some of those, like, even I did a merch run recently, and I never know, I never understand. It's hard to connect with, or not connect, but understanding, the size of your fan base or the loyalty of them. Like, it's hard to see that on a day-to-day thing. And I recently did a print of merch, and, I was a bit nervous about it because I'm like, oh God, what if we put this out and no one buys it, and, all this sort of stuff. And then it's literally, I went out for dinner once we posted it, and I came back from dinner and it was sold out. And moments like that just make me go, it's like, it's crazy. You feel like almost like you don't even understand like the size of what you're doing in the moment, because like at the end of the day, I'm sitting here in my studio, like doing my thing, writing my music and having a good time. But, it's really cool to have those moments where you see like that is connecting with other people.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the healthiest place to be, where you just sort of stay focused. You keep that focus fairly small and fairly humble. And then every time your success sort of surprises you, that's just a happy little moment, right?
Yeah.
And because I think it's very easy to get, if something good happens, to then focus on like, oh, let's try to make this happen again and bigger. And that's when you can kind of lose the focus a little bit, as opposed to like, oh, well, this is going pretty good, so like, let's lean into the fun of this and whatever is working about this, but more or less like, let's just keep this moving,
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more. Like, those moments are not necessarily meaning, okay, well, like, sure, it puts fire in you, but it doesn't mean, oh, okay, like, let's make this into this or force it into that. It's like, what we're doing is working, like, and I say we because there is a team behind me. I have management, I have an agent, and I trust their opinion with things, and they trust me with my work and my artistry. So, it is cool to see that all of that strategy all put together is working.
Well, is there, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I'm just looking at my notes. I have to ask you about this just because I don't know what it means. I was sent a bunch of stuff about you.
Yeah.
One of the things was that I just didn't know if this was happening now or if this was in the past, that you were in the U.S. Touch Football World Cup.
So the World Cup is next year, and I made the U.S. team that's going to the World Cup next year.
So I mean, you're still ironic. Doing it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I actually had, well, you can't really see it, but I had a touch football tournament on the weekend, and I whacked my nose, and I don't know if I broke it or what happened, but yeah, I had a tournament on the weekend. It was like a friendly prep tournament. But yeah, I've been a big touch football player for years. I love it. It's like touch rugby. I know like a lot of Americans would not have seen it before. It's not really like a well-known sport over here.
Right.
but yeah, I loved it and started doing it over here, um, as a way to kind of take myself out of music for a second and have that kind of balance. And yeah, I met a team over here. We started playing a little bit, and then they said that you should trial for this US team. It's the 27s team. So they have an opens team, a 27s team, and then they've got like men's opens, men's 27s.
Wait,
And then they've
what
got
is
mixed
27s?
teams.
I don't know.
So 27 and up.
Okay, got it.
Not that it matters, but yeah,
That's
they have
very
some, like,
interesting.
some different
I wonder
categories.
why it's like 27 is the cutoff.
I know, it's bizarre. Normally in Australia it's 30, so I don't know. Maybe the World Cup is different. I don't know why they have that, but yeah, they just said like come trial. It was over in Austin, Texas, and yeah, I went and trialed and had an amazing time. Met some incredible people, and then they were like, you have to have, by the time World Cup comes, you have to have lived in the States for 3 years, which by next year it will be 3 years. So, I can't really play in Oz or trial for Oz team because I'm never there. So, yeah, I went to the trial and made the team, which is incredible. So, yeah, it's like mid next year over in England.
Amazing.
So, yeah, that's happening now.
I mean, how much
little side quest,
right? Yeah, totally.
Right?
But I have to imagine, like, just training for that takes up a fair amount of your time.
Yeah, it does. Like, I have held like a fair bit of fitness from like just always staying kind of on top of it. But they have a program to follow, which honestly sometimes is a bit easier for me because, like, sometimes I go to work out and go to the gym a lot of the times because I'm like, I know it's good for my health and I know it's good for, like, my mental health. I think some people see me and they see that I'm quite fit and they think that I like am always motivated to go to the gym. But like most of the time I'm like, I know this is good for me, but I'd rather be sitting down writing music or like, doing any of that sort of stuff. So sometimes like it's hard when I am trying to get to the gym because I also I've spent my whole day making decisions and coming up with this, that, and the other. So like I kind of just want to be told what to do. So the good thing about the training program is they say like, this is what we're doing. This is how you should be training. And so I follow it, which is really good. But yeah, they have like monthly fitness testing, which can be a lot. And sometimes I'm doing it in random cities under random circumstances. Like we have a tournament, the national tournament coming up in October, and my logistics for that is an absolute nightmare. I'm like playing 2 days. On the Friday, I fly out that night to play a show. Then I fly back early next morning to play more games. And then I fly out that night to go play another show. Like it's not logistically helping me at all, but, it's something that I love. Like I love playing touch football. I love the people that I play with. It's a great environment. And, there are bounds. There's definitely points where I'm like, I can't, I don't. They're very, amazing with it. I told them, like, when I first started training with them, like I'm away almost every weekend. So they're pretty good with me in terms of training. I think I just said it early. And I'm totally understanding if I can't be a part of it. But I think I just I fit in with the team really well. We play well together. So they're like, and again, for this World Cup team, a lot of us don't live in the same city. So we don't really get a lot of opportunity to be together anyway. So it doesn't impact that too much.
That's
but yeah,
exciting.
The training can be pretty intense. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
No, it is really exciting. I mean, it's just crazy to, hearing about all of that scheduling. And we've talked about how, you like to pack a lot in, that kind of thing. The more we talk, I'm like, I feel like you're the kind of person who like hates boredom. Like, are you the kind of person who's really trying
Honestly, it's
to like?
so funny because I'm the opposite. I'm like, give
Really?
me time
Okay.
by myself. Well, I'm happy to read. I'm happy to, like, I can entertain myself all day. And I think the problem was, and this is like going back to what we said before, I got into this like kind of grind mentality where it was like, it's my music and career and everything else is a distraction, whether it's sport, fitness, whether it's fun, whether it's getting drunk or having a night out, whether it's relationships, like all of it was like, it's a distraction. And I went too far that way, which meant, I wasn't inspired. I wasn't motivated. And it's funny because like touch was one of those things where I was like, oh, like this will be a bit of a fun. It's a schedule. It's also social. Like, it kind of has everything in it, but it became a lot more involved than like I was planning for it to be. But I'm actually like someone who I can sit in stillness. I can very much, if anything, it's like funny because I have more so been like, I don't want to put too much on my plate and I want to take everything off and all that sort of stuff. But I was finding in doing that, I was going too far that way. So now it's like, throw a couple of things in there, so that I kind of have a bit more of a open, it kind of grounds me a little bit by doing those things, but they're not as like time intensive as they seem. Like the World Cup stuff isn't too time intensive. And the good thing about it is when I'm in the moment, I'm being very present. And I think that's like a very good thing for me because I can be all over the place, waking up in a different city, focus at any moment, focusing on, okay, what am I meant to post on socials? I've got this remix I have to finish. I got to write this song. I need to mix and master this. There's so much going on. So it can be relieving to have that moment. And also like, I mean, it sounds crazy. It's not crazy at all, but like to have a moment where you're not just sitting with your own thoughts, like sometimes when you do go into like, I'm going to say a standard job, that doesn't mean anything, but like, if you're going into an office or you work at Starbucks or whatever it is, it's like, these are your jobs. You're talking to people. A lot of the time you don't have time to just like sit there and think and dwell.
Yeah.
Whereas like in this world, like, things you can think about like all day
plenty
don't
of dwelling.
serve you at all.
Yeah, a lot of dwelling
so
going
much.
on.
The spirals are insane. But yeah, so it's I don't know, it's kind of nice to have those things, but yeah, I definitely can spend plenty of time on my own, not doing a lot. I'm a big reader. I love like learning new things. I can be a big grandma. My friends joke or even one of my managers, she jokes because she's like, okay, you got to like stop being a grandma and like get out of the house and do things. I'm like, oh, but like there's so much I could do by myself at home. Or like my friends are like, oh, come to the kick-ons or like, what do you call it? Like the after party. And I'm like, like I want to go home and go to sleep so I can wake up and like, I don't know, like do washing or like do some boring thing at home.
No, it's good. I mean, it seems like you have a very good head on your shoulders for all this kind of stuff. Is there any part of it that you feel like is an issue that needs to be addressed? Any part of it you're still working on? Because it seems like in general, your attitude about all of this is pretty spot on.
Honestly, if you would have spoken to me maybe 8 months ago, I would have said the opposite. Like, I don't think I was in a good headspace. But I mean, probably like that's holding myself to my own standards because I definitely felt like I had my shit together, but there was a lot of spiraling. There was like mentally I was not in a good place, which meant I wasn't like being productive. I wasn't writing a lot of music or like, I don't know, it was like a bit of a mess for me. But I think like now it was again like a new phase of learning myself, learning how I work. Obviously, everyone is so different. Some people react better when they don't have a second to think. Some people react better when they only have time to think. And, most of us sit somewhere along that spectrum of, like what's going to be the most productive for us. There's definitely more I want to work on in that sense. I think right now I'm actually in a month off, which to me is like absolute bliss because I'm someone who I'm an anxious personality type. So I'm like, I love routine. I love predictability, which is the complete opposite of like a DJ lifestyle.
Very much. Yeah.
So right now I'm in a point where I'm like, and it's great for my writing because I feel like I have all this unlimited time to just like write and create and experiment and do whatever I want. But it's more my mentality when I get like from August onwards, I only have probably like 4 weekends off from August until New Year's. So
yeah,
it's going to be pretty crazy, and I'm interested and excited to see how I can kind of hold this mentality, but when it is kind of in that really disruptive schedule. I feel the best equipped that I ever have to do that, which is good, but it's taken some time, some learning, definitely some moments. I think I moved to America thinking that I had it all figured out and I was such an adult and I knew my shit. And
yeah.
like, that was a complete shock because I didn't know shit. Like I felt like a kid again. Like I was like, why do I not know like the basic, I don't know. It was the first time I'd like lived out of home properly for like long periods too. So that's like,
Well,
that's a
and
whole
there's
different
probably
thing.
some culture shock too, I'd imagine.
Oh, such culture shock, which I was not, I don't know, I wasn't expecting it because, you know, it's America, it's English speaking country. I've been here so many times before, but living here is very different from visiting. And it's like, it's sometimes the smallest little things that you're like, oh, like that's not like how everyone is. Like you guys do it differently over here, or like we do it differently over there. And like, now that I know that, I sometimes go about some things a little bit differently, and especially LA, you know, like I was in Sydney, but I was out in the suburbs and then I got plonked right below Hollywood and was like, why is everyone so angry all the time? Like,
yeah. Well, and LA especially is such a crazy, bizarro land.
Oh my God, it's bizarre.
You know, because everybody's desperate to make it in LA. You know, it's like not only is it a giant city, a crazy American city, but yeah, LA specifically, man, everybody's chasing something there, and the vibe can be insane.
The vibe is insane. I remember I used to go into my like supermarket and people were just like so on edge. And I'm like, man, like relax. Everything's all good. You know, like everything's okay. Like, I don't even know if everything's okay, but like, it's not worth fighting over a fucking orange, you know, like just relax. Like, yeah. So I don't know. Definitely a big culture shock for sure.
Well, is there anything else we should talk about? Anything else that's on your mind? I know we didn't really talk about this, but I know you got the Monster Cat release coming up.
Yeah,
and that tune's great.
No, honestly, I am really excited to release with Monster Cat. I've never released with them before, so this is the first one with them. But there's quite a few coming with them, so I'm excited to sort of start this journey with them. They're an awesome label. They've been super enthusiastic. This song that's coming out actually, it's kind of ironic because this was a song that got pitched to a lot of labels and, you know, no one picked it up and no one wanted it. And it's interesting because I've been playing in my sets for quite a while and it always has an awesome crowd reaction. And I was just so like, I felt like this is like one of the best songs I've written. Like, how is this one that's, you know, struggling to be put somewhere? And I believe in it. My fans believe in it. Like, you know, like none of the labels are kind of coming to the party. And so I decided I was going to self-release it. And just as I was pushing the button, Monster Cat were like, yo, we just heard this song of yours. Like, we want it. And which is great because it's like, I don't know, it's a really awesome kind of dynamic and it's a good way to start with a label, having that kind of moment. But yeah, other than that, like the rest of the year musically is very stacked. So I'm very excited about that. I've got singles coming out. I've got an EP coming out. It's pretty much month to month, back to back releases. So I'm kind of, I don't know, very excited for everyone to see this next 6 months. Obviously, like I've been listening to the music for a while now. So it's I'm over it, but like I'm excited now to like share it with people and see them. I think anyone who's been following me quite closely has probably noticed like the past 7 or 8 months, I have been a lot slower on my release plan than usual. And it was really just me resetting myself. But like, you know, you can hear like in the mentality side of it, but also just like musically, I was at a point where I'm like, I want to really hone in on my skills and get better and write like some music I'm really, you know, I'm proud of. And So now, like, I'm excited because I feel like I've done all that time. I'm now bursting at the seams with music, and every day I feel like I'm writing more and more because I'm like in a good headspace with all of that too. So I'm kind of excited now for everyone to see this kind of trajectory I'm on in terms of music and releases and the music that I'm writing. I don't know. I'm excited to see how everyone goes for it. This is like kind of the calm before the storm, I think, because it's the end of the year is just like track, EP, track, like even into next year, we've got them already like coming through. So, and I'm doing a writing camp that I've sort of set up for next week as well. So they're always just like, I don't know, inspiration central and tracks coming out everywhere. So yeah, a lot of things happening this year. So, and a lot of tours. I've got a lot of shows, getting on a bus tour with Mersive, shows with Adventure Club, and some other headline ones and festivals and stuff. So
yeah,
exciting.
I love the Adventure Club boys. Have you done is this first bus tour, or have you done a bus tour before?
I did a bus tour when I first came, or like 6 months into being here with Dirt Monkey, which was, I loved it. I had the best time.
The bus
like
is the
I'd
best.
heard
The bus
is the best. I thought everyone was like, oh, you're living in a bus and like it can be like a bit tough. You're all together. Like I had the best time. It was probably the most relaxed I've been touring. Like you don't really have to worry about anything. You get heaps of sleep. Like you get to like hang out with, I mean, it would be different if you're on tour with people that you hated, but like I've been fortunate enough to be with absolutely incredible people. So I'm very excited for that at the end of the year as well. So, and I'm excited to play with Adventure Club too. They're like, I used to play their music from when I first started DJing. So I'm massive fans of theirs. So
no, that's a fun moment. That's a little full circle thing too. This has been great, man. Thank you for taking the time. I really like talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome. Like, yeah, as soon as I like heard and found out about it, I'm like, damn, I'm so excited. Like, I remember listening to an episode you did with Flux when I think it was during COVID. I don't know if it was during COVID, but I listened to it during COVID. Yeah, I just remember it so distinctly. It was such a good episode that I like really enjoyed. And then I don't know, when I realized I was going to be on here talking to you, I was like, yes. Here we go.
That's good. That's great to hear. Yeah, that Flux one was kind of special. It seemed like it wasn't going to happen. Like it kept getting pushed back and canceled, and then kind of just randomly he hopped on like almost an hour late after I thought it had been canceled already, and so I was sort of scrambling, and he was sort of he was in an interesting headspace that day, and we ended up just having a really. I still think about that one. That was a really fun
I resonate. Like sometimes when people ask like which specific episodes to start with, like with your podcast, that's like one I send them to a lot, which is probably like not as easy. Like maybe I should send them like
No, I think that's a great one. I'm happy that you've sent it to anyone. That's really nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's great. So, but yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. Like I think like something like this is super rare, and I don't know, really enjoy like every episode you do, but I don't know, it's a really awesome thing that you're doing for both artists, but people on the other end too, like getting the opportunity to kind of see where our headspace is at any given moment, or like our mentality towards things. It's super interesting.
Yeah, well, that means a lot. It really does. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for doing it. We did it together.
No
so
worries.
This is great.
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Well, I'll let you go here. But hopefully we do run into each other somewhere out there soon.
I hope so. Where are you based?
I'm based in DC, but I get out to LA fairly frequently.
Nice. Well, let me know if you're ever out here. I think I'm going to DC a bit later in the year, maybe October or something. So
yeah, that'd be great. One way or another. But thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good night, and talk to you later.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.